We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chav Zayin, the second sicha for the Parshas Kedoshim. And the Rebbe questions the statement of the Rambam and the Torah's Kahanim that one who cheats on the measure and has a false measuring and through which he cheats other people by giving a wrong measure, that's considered like denying the exodus of Egypt. So what's the connection specifically with cheating on measures? Any cheating, if Yetzias Mitzrayim is all the Eibishter's wonders and the Eibishter's supervision, like we saw, the Eibishter is in charge and watches over everything. So why single out if one cheats in the scale or in the measures? Why not just stealing from someone or other forms of cheating? Why is that unique? This form of cheating. The Rebbe explains a very interesting idea over here that when you're cheating on the scale, you're like being acting in a crooked way. Because on one hand, you're saying, oh, I'm weighing the stuff. There's a scale over here. And the scales have the wrong, and the measures are the wrong measures. And the Rebbe says that's really the beginning. The Torah doesn't even allow not only not to cheat the person in actuality, the Torah doesn't allow you even to possess these kinds of measuring that have false measurements. You don't even have them in your home. You're not doing anything, but you're over on the prohibition, even having them in your home without cheating it. But why? Because that's the beginning of the descent. To have something which is meant in order to trick somebody to cheat, it's the beginning of this, and that's why this is connected to the exodus of Egypt, as the Rebbe will explain. We'll do step by step. Aleph, benegeya dem tzivui fun midos umishkolis, as it relates, the Torah tells you about having the right measures and the right weights, which is the Parshas Kedoshim. And the Torah says, by welchem the Torah sagt, the Torah says, Loi sasu ovel b'mishpot b'mido goimer moiznei tzedek. Don't do injustice when you're judging. That's when you're measuring. Whether it is the measure, the dry measure that you are measuring and it's a wrong measurement, or it's a scale, you put the wrong measurement, the wrong weight over there. So the Torah begins, the Torah says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeisi eschem eretz Mitzrayim. I am God, your God, who took you out of Egypt, and therefore, loisasu avel b'mishpat, you cannot do this injustice when you are. This is called a mishpat too, when you are measuring and you're giving don't do any injustice over there. Don't cheat on the scales or on the measurements. So what's the connection to the pasuk says, I took you out of Egypt, and therefore don't cheat. So bring the Rambam brings down from Torah's Kahanim, from the Torah's Kahanim. He says, V'chol ha'koifer b'mitzvahs midos. Anyone who denies the mitzvah of measurement, and we'll see later on, the Rebbe is going to explain all the languages of the Rambam here. The Rambam doesn't say one who is not careful with measure. It says, Chol ha'koifer b'mitzvahs midos. Anybody who denies the mitzvah of measuring, ki koifer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim, is as if he would be denying the exodus of Egypt. That's the connection. The Torah says, I've taken you out of Egypt. Don't have false measurement. One who denies the mitzvah of measurement is like denying the exit of Egypt. And the Rambam says, Sheitchilas hatzivui. That is the beginning of the command. What does the exactly mean, the beginning of the command? We'll see, the Rebbe will explain. But meaning it all started, the commandments all started with the exodus of Egypt when we became a people. So if you deny the mitzvah of measurement, it's like denying the exodus of Egypt, which was the beginning of the command. The Rebbe will address it in a minute. And Rambam says further, "V'chol hamakabel olav mitzvahs midos," and everybody who accepts upon themselves this mitzvah of measurement, Yetzias Mitzrayim, then he is admitting, he agrees to the exodus of Egypt. Because the exodus of Egypt is the cause for all commandments. Because where do we get the commandments that the Torah commands us? Begin with Yetzias Mitzrayim, when the Eibishter took us out and made us for a people and then gave us the Torah. So that's why there's a connection of Yetzias Mitzrayim with the mitzvah of measuring. So, what is the special connection? Yetzias Mitzrayim is the beginning of all mitzvahs. Why are we equating specifically the exodus of Egypt to the mitzvah of scales of measurements? Was is the Sichos von mitzvahs midas davke to Yetzias Mitzrayim? What is specifically the connection of this mitzvah of measurement to the exodus of Egypt? Is Mevayer, the Maggid Mishnah explains the connection like as follows. He says is this, quote, as a shoykil b'midah chaseda, one who weighs and the measure is lacking. So you're saying that this stone weighs a pound and you put it on the scale and let's say this stone doesn't weigh a pound. So you are weighing with a measure that is lacking. That is like somebody who's doing a sin in secret, in hiding, because nobody knows you have a bad weight and you are presenting it that if it's a pound, and it's not really the right way. So you're cheating in hiding, which means shehu koifer behashgocha. You are denying in supervision that Hashem is watching you, because you think you can get away by giving a false weight. And nobody knows. They think that that's the right ways. So you're denying supervision. Oh, so that's connected to the exodus of Egypt. Yetzias Mitzrayim hoyu bo moifsim mechudoshim. The exodus of Egypt, in the exodus, there were very novel signs and proofs of miracles. They point to the novelty and the supervision that Hashem, because all of the Makkahs and the Exodus, everything that took place, these are novel things that are taking place because they point the Eibishter is supervising and he is running the world and he takes us out of Egypt. So you pretending that Hashem doesn't see what you're doing, you are denying the exodus of Egypt, which was a very clear demonstration that Hashem is in charge and he sees and he creates all of the things and he supervises. Okay, so while we understand this idea that you are thinking that nobody sees you, you're denying Hashem's supervision, but that is actually true not only when you're cheating on the scale. As for example, we know that there's a difference between one who robs somebody openly, takes something away from someone. He is obligated to return what he robbed. But if somebody steals when nobody sees, then he'll have to pay double. There's a din of kefil there. And it's explained why is stealing worse than robbing? Because a person who robs doesn't care about people and he doesn't care about Hashem. So he's not denying Hashem's supervision. He just doesn't care that people supervise, that he's being supervised. He does, he violates even under supervision. But somebody who steals explains, in the Chazal, the Gemara explains, he is pretending as if people don't know, but he's pretending as if Hashem doesn't know. So that's worse. So why is that not equated to Yetzias Mitzrayim? Same idea as cheating in the scales. So why did the Torah pick Dafke, the cheating on the scales? So the Rebbe said we need to understand. Oyich Geneva, also when you're stealing something without the knowledge of the person, is ke'over aveda b'seisa. That's also like violating a transgression in hiding. Shehu koifer b'hashgocha, you're denying that somebody's watching you. K'mefurish b'chazal, as very clearly articulated in our sages of blessed memory, as der choimer from Geneva legabe gezela, that what is Geneva more serious in a way over robbing somebody, and that's where you have to pay double for Geneva, not for Gezela, is mitzad them, it's because was kaviyochel osa ayin shalomato kilu einaroya. He sort of what he's doing is that the people here, he made as if the eye that is below, as if it doesn't see, and the ear eine shamas. And that means that he's making Hashem denying that Hashem sees him. The ayin shalmata is the Eberster's eye that looks below. Ayin shalmata, as if the Eberster doesn't see, and an ear that doesn't hear. So that's very clearly stated in the Gemara in Bava Kama about Geneva. Un apa pikein, and yet state nit by Klolus Isur Geneva, we don't say by the general prohibition of stealing, which is sort of doing the sin in hiding, as a koifer b'mitzvahs Geneva ke koifer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim. The one who denies the mitzvah of stealing is like denying the exodus of Egypt, like we're saying over here, with regards to cheating on the scales. In the general stealing, why do we connect it to this specific form of stealing in which he gives the wrong measures and cheats the person that way? And the Rebbe says, in generally, this is stealing, taking away something. But then there's various different ways of cheating. It says, there's the pasuk says you're not allowed to cheat the other person, whatever it is, whether it's in in any kind of way. Why do we specifically connect this to these scales or to the weights? Generally, the prohibition against cheating. Which also the mitzvah of measuring is included in generally in the lois soinu ishas hamisoi. There is a prohibition: do not cheat your friend. One person cannot cheat; is not allowed to. There's a prohibition against cheating another person. Is toichno. So, what is the general idea not to cheat? Was menart op dem zweiten, that you are tricking, you are cheating, you are deceiving the other person. Abemele is as punkt mitzvahs midas. It's the same as the mitzvah of measure in which you're deceiving the other person. It's like doing a sin in hiding. That means you're denying. You think that you can deceive, and you're denying that God is supervising you. And over there don't know equation. Specifically, it's equated when it comes to the measure. And similarly, there's many other mitzvahs which are sins which are done in hiding. And the question becomes, so the question comes back to its place. The Magid Mishnah explains, because Yetzias Mitzrayim showed us that there is supervision. And if you are cheating on the scales, you're sort of denying Hashem's supervision. But there's many other mitzvahs like that. Anytime you cheat, what is that inyan meyuchad for mitzvahs midas? What is the unique, special idea of the mitzvah of measuring? Was davke bei ihr wird gesagt, a koifer mitzvahs midas, ki koifer b'tzias Mitzrayim. Only over here we say, if you deny the mitzvah of measuring, you're also denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Rebbe wants to know, why is this in the pasuk, and how do we explain what the pasuk does Yetzias Mitzrayim next to the scales? The Magid Mishnah explains, because that's denying the hashgacha, and the Rebbe's question is, why only scale? Anytime you steal or you're cheating, you're denying Hashem is seeing you, the supervision. So why is there the Anoich Hashem, the Exodus of Egypt, only specifically to the level of Midas? The Rebbe is going to ask another specific question in the language of the Rambam. The Rambam actually changes from the Lashon of the Teres Kahanim, which is the source of the Rambam, and the Rambam adds the words that Yetzias Mitzrayim is the beginning of the command, and that caused all the commands. Why? What is the Rambam trying to say with these additional words more than the Teres Kahanim? Let's look inside. Base. We also need to understand the language of the Rambam. The Rambam says that the Chol HaKoifer b'mitzvahs midos kekoifer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Anyone who denies the mitzvah of measuring is like denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. Then the Rambam adds the words, Shohi Tchilas Hatzivu. That's the beginning of the command. Then what? Yetzias Mitzrayim is the beginning of all the commandments. And then he says, B'chol HaMekabel, and if you accept the mitzvah midos, Moide b'Yetzias Mitzrayim, agree, Shehi Groma L'chol HaTzivut, that caused all the tzivut. What is the Rambam trying to tell us? Od di Verter, these words that the Rambam writes, Shehi Tchilas HaTzivut, is the beginning of all commands. And Shehi Groma L'chol HaTzivuim, and the Yetzias Mitzrayim is the cause for all the commands. Stehen it in Teres Kohanim, Okar Rambam. They're not stated in the Teres Kohanim, which is the source of the Rambam. These are additions of the Rambam. So seemingly this is surprising. Then darf the Rambam mechadish sein, Does the Rambam then need to come up with this novelty? This is the Rambam's Chiddush over here as the grace for Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're trying to tell you, you're denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. What is Yetzias Mitzrayim? Shehi Techilas HaTzivui Higrom L'chol HaTzivui. That was the beginning of the command, and that's causal commands. Are we trying to make this Yetzias Mitzrayim big, that's the beginning? The Rambam hat kann sagen, Belois, he could have just said, V'interes koinim, ki koifer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim, Maide b'Yetzias Mitzrayim, you're denying the exodus of Egypt, no, you're agreeing. Why does he add, this is the beginning of the command, and this causes all the commandment? So, to tell us, if saying you're not going to do the measures properly, so you're going to deny Yetzias Mitzrayim. Oh, you know what Yetzias Mitzrayim? That's the cause of all this. We're building up what Yetzias Mitzrayim is. Why do we need to build it up? And on the other hand, Yetzias Mitzrayim is not only the great leader. Yetzias Mitzrayim at Oiv Giton, Kama v'Kama Yonim Klolim. It has accomplished and made, brought about many generally ideas. Und doch kleibt uns der Rambam darf ja auch dominion, but here the Rambam chooses this specific idea. Was Yetzias Mitzrayim is Tchilas HaTzivui. Yetzias Mitzrayim is the beginning of the command, and Grom L'chol HaTzivui makos all the command. Why does the Rambam have to say that? Now, the Mefarshim explained, the Rebbe brings down, it's not just trying to say, build up what Yetzias Mitzrayim is, that led to him, but this is a very specific connection to what the Rambam is saying over here. Because when you deny Yetzias Mitzrayim, which caused us this mitzvah of midah, so you're denying, so that's connected to the specifically, we're not just saying things about Yetzias Mitzrayim, but we're saying this Yetzias Mitzrayim is what brought about this mitzvah. Mefarshim zogen, Mefarshim answer, as those was hakoifer b'midas, chashvinale ki koifer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim. This that we consider one who denies measures like you're denying Yetzias Mitzrayim is mitam, is for the reason sheitchilas kol hatzivuyim. It's the beginning of all commands. The whole ha-mitzvahs shetziva lonu Hashem, and all the mitzvahs are that Hashem told us mistafi Yetzias Mitzrayim. They branch off Yetzias Mitzrayim because that's why we're doing mitzvahs. So they want to say the reason why it's not like the Maggid Mishnah said that is because of the special denying the Hashgacha, but they're saying if you don't do the midos, you're denying Yetzias Mitzrayim because Yetzias Mitzrayim is the reason we have to do the mitzvahs. The one who denies the measure, which is a branch of Yetzias Mitzrayim, is like denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's the connection, that's what the Rambam means there. But the Rebbe said in that case, that applies to all mitzvahs. All the mitzvahs come. So why are we connecting it with the mitzvah of the scales? All mitzvahs start with Yetzias Mitzrayim. And if you don't do a mitzvah, you're denying the Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is the start. And if you believe in the mitzvah, you're agreeing to Yetzias Mitzrayim because all the mitzvahs come. It's nothing special about this mitzvah. So either way, we don't have whether this is just trying to build up what Yetzias Mitzrayim is. Why do we need to build it up that way? And according to the Mefarshim, that explained that you are denying Yetzias Mitzrayim because Yetzias Mitzrayim is the basis for everything, the Tzivuyim. The Rebbe said that's very difficult. Well, there's Zelber Inyan, the same idea. Vos midas is asif Yetzias Mitzrayim, just like measurements is a branch of Yetzias Mitzrayim, is do by jeden tzivu von Torah. That is exists by every command of the Torah. So why did Torah say Anecha Hashem Elokecha Mitzrayim lo yisasa avu b'mishpat? What's the connection specifically here? So basically, we want to know what's the connection between Yetzias Mitzrayim with scales, with the measures. And the Rebbe brings down now in Nois Gimel that the halacha of scales is different than all the other halachas. The older halachas, not to cheat, not to steal, is about robbing the person. The halacha about the scale is not to keep it in your possession. And then why? And that will explain to us that even in your possession, and that's the chiddush of the din of the scales, and that's the connection to Yetzias Mitzrayim, as the Rebbe explains. Gimel, v'yeshleimer abir b'zeh. So we can say the explanation is the Gemara zogt. The Gemara says, as the lav, the kos of rachmana b'mishkolis, that this prohibition, the Torah writes about scales, choch as gezel malyu. This is like regular stealing. So why is the Torah especially telling you not to cheat, but you're robbing the person by cheating him with the scales? That's regular stealing, regular robbing. Tut oiv lavir olav mishas asiyah, that you are violating this prohibition just by making these scales, by making false weights, by making false measures. You already are violating. With the Rambam paskent, and as the Rambam rules, based on this, that kol mishe mashe bebeisei, anybody who holds in his home midah chaseda, a measure which is lacking, not the true measure of what it is was supposed to be. Oiver b'loisase is already violating a loisase. You didn't steal anything yet. You're just holding it in your home. You're going to be violating a loisase. Similarly, also by the positive mitzvah, Zok the Rambam says mitzvah saseh l'tzadik hamaznaim. Chulu, it's a positive mitzvah to justify the scales. Yofa, very, very good. Nice, uledagdik b'cheshbon b'shas asiyoson, and to make accurate in their accounting. When you make them, you have to have the right measure. So you see the making and the possessing, it's already a prohibition, and that's the asay to have it correct. That isur von midos umishkolos chaseda, the prohibition from measures and weights which are lacking, is nit maschil von chisoron mamishal chaver. It doesn't start when you are losing your friend's money, you're taking away his money. Nor gleich by asiya v'shiyir base, as soon as you make it and you leave it in your house, from amida chaseda, from a measure that is lacking, a non-justice scale, a non-justice weight, you're already violating the issue. And this explanation, now that we're saying that the prohibition is even to possess it, explains to us another halacha in the Rambam. Normally, when there is a prohibition, it has to be some value, not any amount. If you steal something which is less than a shava pruta, there's no prohibition there. That's when you're stealing from someone, because on such a small amount, the Torah is not care. But that's when you're causing a loss. The loss has to be something substantial, at least a minimum amount. But when we're talking about a scale, over there, the Rambam rules any amount, even a kol shehu, would violate, because here it's not about losing of the other one's money, but the fact that you're stealing from him. Over here, it's about your scale that has to be accurate. Val Pizeh, says the Rebbe in the bracket, is euch muvan noch a chidush. It's also understood an additional novelty, was man gefind by midas umishkolis, which we find by measure and weights. Ubelshein Rambam, to use the language of the Rambam, HaTorah hikpida ala midas bekol shahu. The Torah was particularly, when it comes to measure any amount, afal pi shebishar gizelis like pida Torah el bepruta. Even though in other thefts, stealing, robbing people, the Torah was only particularly, if it's a pruta, it needs to be an amount. But here we say any amount. Why? Well, the isur for midas umishkol is because this prohibition of measures and weights is nit blois der chisonim mamash shel chaver. It's not just because you're making him lose money, which would need a pruta to the, nor the etzem Yetzias from the midah chaseda, but just the existence of a measure which is lacking. So, why? But if you're not stealing the other person, why is it so? Why did the Torah prohibit to keep these scales that are not accurate if you're not using them? So one can say, well, if you have the bad scale in your home, you might come to use it. But the Rebbe says more than that. It's more than that, than just because you might use it. There is something inherently wrong in having a on justice weight in your home. And the Rebbe says, we can say, as the Tama Dover, the reason why you're not allowed to have it isn't it nor, it's not only about from them, their mitzias from Amidah Chaseda Babais. If you have such an existence, if exists a measure that is lacking in your home, this might lead to a stumbling block. As can bringen zu it might lead you to having a loss of your friend will have a loss. Nor euch, weil die etzem hametzias from the midah chaseda, but also just the fact that there exists a measure which is lacking, which is untrue, on its own, just for that alone, not because of what it might lead, is that Isur Chomer is a very serious prohibition. Why? And the Rebbe explains, because over here, it's a trick. It's not just taking away the other one's money, but you're pretending to measure and you're giving the wrong measure. So that's a level of deceit. Not just fully. This is a deceitful measure in your home. That's what in them. The Rebbe explains. The difference between measures and weights and other types of theft or cheating is by the other types of theft or cheating is beim Ganav Faram Lois Ein Rotzen. Over there, the Ganav has only one desire. He has one wish. What does he want to do? He does something through which he takes away his friend's money. He takes away what doesn't belong to him. Takes his friend's money, takes it away. But here, it's not deceitful. Here, it's a deceitful. Over here, there is two movements, opposite kind of ideas over here. The fact that you're measuring and you're weighing for your friend is an oizdruk that expresses you're expressing, okay, I'm considerate of my friend, I'm making sure to give him the right thing. You're doing an act was beweist. You're showing I'm doing something, I don't want to cheat you, I'm weighing it. That's what the act of weighing does. And together with that, he's making a lacking measure. As the Zelba Pa'ula Hamadida, that the same act of measuring, so bringing that brings to stealing the friend's money. Und der Fahr aser teure de etzem siya ushihia von Amida Chaseda. That's why the Torah prohibits just making and keeping from a measure that is lacking. Even if in actuality nobody's going to be hurt, nobody's going to be wronged by it, like an all, you're not going to use it. While the teuchen for mitzvahs midas is, because what is the concept? What is the idea of the mitzvah midah? Zu schöler sein od die armumis in dem Adam klape din, to negate the trickery and deceitfulness, the conniving in the person towards the halacha to deceit and make a scale and have it the wrong scale. That is why there is a special prohibition on making and keeping it, even if you don't use it, because it's a deceitful thing. And the Rebbe explains now that this gives us the explanation in the comparison to Yetzias Mitzrayim to the scales. Dalet, like them biur in the Chaimer for mitzvahs midis. Based on this explanation, the seriousness of the mitzvah midis, that euch werden glattig der Loschen. This will also explain to us the language kol hakoifer b'mitzvahs midis. The Lashon used is you're denying the mitzvah of midas. What does it mean to deny the mitzvahs of midas? L'chayra, it would seem the Rambam should say, if you are not careful in the mitzvah of midas, what does it mean denying? The Rebbe wants to learn denying the mitzvah of midas means that special uniqueness of midas that the Torah wants you to be careful, not to cheat, not to have items that are deceptive. The Rebbe asks like this: what does it mean, kol hakofer b'mitzvahs? L'chayre loitin pirush hanal for Magid Mishnah. According to the Magid Mishnah's explanation, as a shoikel b'midah chaseda kofer b'ashgocha. If you are just weighing with if you're going to weigh with a measure that is lacking, you're denying Hashem's supervision. You think you can get away with it, nobody sees you. Then it would be more fitting the Lashon, kol she'eina nizar b'mitzvahs midas. If you're not careful in the mitzvah of midas, meaning, and you're not agreeing that Hashem is supervising, or that ain't a makabel or you're not accepting upon yourself to follow the mitzvahs. The Rambam says that one who does accept is agreeing. Why does it say that he denies the mitzvah midas? If you pass the lashon hakofer b'mitzvahs midas, what is the fitting? How does the language denying the mitzvah midas fit in? What does it mean you're denying? If without the Rebbe's explanation, you denying meant as a lekent in the mitzvah. That means you deny, you don't believe the nedos haste and lekent as the Rebbe the tongue is octave midas. That means that he's denying that Hashem instructed the mitzvah midas. Why would he be denying the Hashem is saying? There's nothing to do with him denying it. He's not doing it. He's not careful in it. But he's not denying that Hashem has discussed it. But that's what the language says. Koifer the mitzvahs is denying that Hashem gave the mitzvah. No. But api hanal yesh lefarish the mloshen. But based upon the Rebbe's explanation, the special seriousness of the mitzvah of midos. What does it mean, kofer b'mitzvahs midos? He denies this unique specialty of mitzvahs midos. As lekund, he denies in them teuchen meyuchad anal. In the above mentioned special, he denies that midos has this special, unique fun mitzvahs midos. That this is mitzvah midos. Aber der glaubt, as der Eibster hat geassert geneves mom chavere. Yes, he believes that the Eibster prohibited to steal the money of your friend. That's not the issue. Er lekend aber, but he denies as der Eibster hat angesagt auf dem etzem asiya, he doesn't deny that the Eibster instructed about making and shehiyah, of making these false scales or holding on to those false scales, punamida chaseda, from a measure which is lacking. That he's denying. Afilu lule chasor mamas chaveru, which means that he says, well, if his friend is not losing anything, then it's okay to hold it. Mitzad dem ormo shebeliboy, because of the deceit in his heart. He says the Eibishter didn't deny that, didn't prohibit that. That kind of over b'mitzvah, that you're denying that the deceit itself, the just making of them is prohibited, is denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. Und if them zog der Rambam v'chol ha-kofer b'mitzvahs midos ki kofer b'Yetzias Mitzrayim, if you're denying the mitzvah of measuring, is as if you're denying the Exodus of Egypt. While der inyan from Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Rebbe will explain what is Yetzias Mitzrayim, is loit shitas Rambam. According to the views of the Rambam, as the Rebbe will continue at the length to explain, verbunden damit, what the Eibishter is meinish, that the Eibishter will punish auf inyonim sheben odom lachavere, nit nor mitzad dem hezek shel chavere. By the Exodus of Egypt, we'll see a tremendous chiddush, that the Eibishter will punish if things between person and person, not only if there's a loss to your friend, nor mitzadem etzem roya halev shel hamazik shel atzmai, but just because of your bad intention, if your heart's bad, kidla come on. The Rebbe will bring out that why were the Mitzrayim punished? Why was Parei punished? And the Rebbe will explain at length that even though the Eibishter destined Yidden should be working in Mitzrayim, and the Mitzrayim can say that they have to be there, and Parei can say he's the king, he had no choice because he had to do that. The bottom line is they get punished because they did it out of negative in their heart, the Reya Levov. If you deny that the Eibishter doesn't allow to even keep bad scales, even when you're not cheating, you're not actually, but just to have that deceit in your possession, that evil, that is punishable. That is Yetzias Mitzrayim. That was the punishment for Yetzias Mitzrayim that took place for Parei and for all the Egyptians. I never will explain. The etzem roya lev shel hamazik shel atzmai, come on. So the Rebbe explains here the seriousness of the mitzvah of midos is to possess, and to possess is if you don't deny, if you deny that possessing alone, you're denying Yetzias Mitzrayim, because in Yetzias Mitzrayim we see you get punished for bad feeling, for being plotting bad, just like the Egyptians and Parei got punished for that. The same thing is the person who has bad scales for making it, for holding it, even if you're not doing anything, you're going to get punished. And that's the equation, as the Rebbe continues to explain now. Ois hey, So the Rebbe goes into a whole lengthy discussion about the Rambam, that people have choices, what they should do, and yet we find that the Eibishter said that Bavodim v'inoisom, the Egyptian will afflict them. They'll be in Mitzrayim. So it almost seems like the Egyptians didn't have a choice. They just said they're going to afflict them. Well, do they all have to do it, as we'll see? And what about Pare? Let's look inside. Hey, in Hilchos Shuva, read the Rambam Ba'ariches. In Hilchos Shuva, the Rambam talks at length wegen dem Iker Godel. But a great principle, Amudat Torah. It's a pillar of the Torah. She'ein haboire koife b'nei ha'adam. Hashem doesn't force people. V'loi goizer aleihem lases toiva ira. He does not decree on them to do either good or bad. That's a principle of the Torah. Everybody has choice to do the right thing. Uniz mevayer. The Rambam explains, as the Eibishter's Yediyah is nit machriach b'chiras ha'adam. The fact that the Eibishter knows what a person will do, but yet that doesn't force that the person must choose that way. The person has the freedom of choice. The Eibishter knows what the person will choose. And then the Rambam continues. Frag the Rambam. So the Rambam asks, how could we say that everybody has a freedom of choice? Well, Iksiv, but doesn't the pasuk say, B'Torah, Va'avodum, that the Yidden, Brisbane absorbed, they've still to Avraham, that the Yidden will serve them, V'inu oisam, and they will abuse them. They will torture them. So the Eibishter said to Avraham that the Egyptian, or the place where they're going to live, Shloi Lahem, are going to afflict them. Harigozar al hamitzrim lasizra. So he decreed on the Egyptians to do bad to the Jewish people. Uksiv, there's another pasuk. It says, "V'kom ha'om hazeh v'zona acharei elikei nechar ha'oretz." This people will get up and they will follow after the gods, the strange gods of the land, that they will follow the less strange God. So the Eibishter is saying that they're going to do that. Hare gozar al Yisrael lavit kum. So the Eibishter decreed that the Yidden should worship the Kechavim or Mazolis, the stars and the constellations, which is the Lekei Nechar HaOretz. But we're saying the Eibishter doesn't decree. And the Rambam answers, Shalei gozar al ish ploini hayadua sheyiyehu hazoina. The Eibishter did not decree on the specific individual, a known individual. The Eibishter said that he is the one that is going to turn away. He's going to be zono acharei. Elakol echod ve'echod me'isom hazoinim. But rather, each and every one of those who turned away, ilu loirotzu lavit lohoyavid. Had they not want to worship, they wouldn't worship. So there is no decree. Everybody it's going to happen, but not individually. Each individual doesn't have to do it. Same thing is by the Egyptians. Kol echod ve'echod me'isna hamitzrayim. Each and every one of those Egyptians, of the Mitzrayim, v'hamirim, the Yisrael, and those who did bad for the Ilu loirotzo lahora lahem, had they not want to do bad to them, harashus biyodei, he had the right, he didn't have to. Shaloi gozer al ish yodua, the Eibishter did not make a decree on a known person, this person. Elohi diyoi, but Hashem let us know, shesoiv zarei osid lihishtabed be'eretz leilahem. The Eibishter told Avraham Avinu that in the end, his seed will be enslaved in a land that doesn't belong to them. But that doesn't mean that those people who enslaved them were decreed to do so. They do that of their own choice. Und danach führt ois. Then he concludes, "Ukvar amarnu," and we'd already said, "She'ein koyach ba'odom leida," that a person doesn't have the power to know, "Heich yoda kodesh baruch hu dvarim hasidim liyis." How does Hashem know what's going to happen? Since Hashem doesn't force it to happen, and they don't have to happen, how does He know the future what's going to happen? Now, the Ravid is if the Masik und sagt. The Ravid, he challenges with the Rambam. He says, "As oib yomer haboyre lazonim," if the Abish, the Creator, says to those who turn away, "Lomozoniso," he's going to say to them, "Why did you turn away?" Vani lo yizkarticha b'shem. I didn't mention you by name, say that you're going to turn away. Kidei toimar, so that you will say, "Shalecho gazarti." I decreed on you, so I didn't mean you. I didn't say that you should. So it says the argument that I would, so they will say to the Eibishter, those who told away, Val mi cholog zeroscho. So on whom did your decree rest? Aloisom shel loy zonu, and the ones who did not turn away, that were fulfilled. Hine leinis kaimog zeroscho. Then your decree would not have been fulfilled. So there has to be somebody doing it, and I'm the one that did it. How could we say that he was not forced to do so? Because who did Hashem mean? Was it the one who didn't do? Benegeya Mitzrayim verantworter b'tirus hasheni. How does he answer about Mitzrayim? Yihaboyre Omar v'onu oisom. They will afflict them. Behem ovdu behem beforach. They did worse than what Hashem decreed. They worked them beforach with backbreaking labor. Vehimisu mehem, and they killed them. Or they v'tovu mehem, and they drowned them. Like the first states, ani kotzavti ma'at. I got a little bit angry. Vehem Ozru l'ro, and they helped for the bad. That's what the Magid Mish, that's what the Ravid said. That's why they were guilty, because they did worse than what the Eibishter decreed. Und then was der Rambam nimmt nicht on dem Tirus from the Ravid. The fact that the Rambam does not accept the reasoning of the Ravid is move on das Rambam. So we understand the Rambam's opinion is as als was the Mitzrayim haben getan, that everything that the Egyptians did is given b'glal gzeres HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is included. They didn't do extra because the Rambam doesn't accept the Ravid's answer. That was all included, even what they did, that they're going to make them work and they're going to afflict them. The Shaila from the Ravid, and as far as the question that Ravid, as the Zonim can in Thailand, that those who tilt can argue, some as Duruch Zain is Kaimek Zuroscha, that Hashem's decree was fulfilled through them, they were the Zoinu. There's Ishlaimar, Loit Vider Alter Rebbe is Mevaid in Negeres HaKodesh. We can say, based on the way the Alter Rebbe explains in Negeres HaKodesh, Negeya Yedin Mazik v'nizak. Alter Rebbe explains with regards to every time you have somebody hurting, damaging, and a person that is damaged. The Alter Rebbe explains over there as al hanizak kvar nigzar min hashamayim. On the one who got hurt, he already has been decreed from heavens to be hurt. Und das was der Mazik is mischai b'dine odom. So, why should the one who did the damage be liable, guilty both in the court of people and in the heavenly court, to pay for the damages, to get punished for the damages, is as the Alter Rebbe explains, al roya b'chirose. It's because of your bad choice. Bal harbe shluchim lamokud. The Eibishter has many agents. You don't have to be the one. Yes, the other person was decreed to be damaged, but you don't have to be the one that is doing the damage. Hashem has many agents, and he can find somebody else who's going to do that job for him. So what she means like this. Even though in actuality, after he made the choice to hurt the other person, we find out, we know, we know that the decree of the heaven, he's doing it. He's the one that fulfilled the decree that the person needs to get hurt. Is das klal nit kein tam of patron im funanaydish. That is at all, that is not a reason to exempt him, the one who did it, from a punishment. But hat nit gemus sein der Schliach zu tun der Meisa Hezek. He did not have to be the agent to do the act of the damage. Harbe shluchim lamokek. David has many agents. Und derfar wird nenesh al roye b'chilose. And that's why he gets punished for his bad choices. So al derech zeh bi'inyonein. Same thing is in our case. The person says the Eibishter, he fulfilled the Eibishter's zona chareim. That's not a good argument. The Ravid's argument, the Rambam will say, that's not a good argument. Bald as gzeres HaKodesh Baruch Hu ba'avodum v'inu oiso. Since the decree of Hashem that they will serve them and they will afflict them. It could have been accomplished through others. Is called echad ve'echad me'isa hamitzriyim hamirim liyisrael. So each and every one of those Egyptians who were doing bad for the Yidden, nenish gevorn al rei b'chirose, they got punished for their bad choices. So therefore it turns out, as the einish makis of the Mitzrayim, so it turns out the reason why the Mitzrayim got beaten and punished is not Mitzadam Hezek. It's not because of the damage that they did to the Yidden, because the Yidden were supposed to be damaged anyways. But again, was the Yidden haben von dem gelitten that the Yidden were suffering. It's because they're bad choices. Auf Yidden ist schon sei wenig so geworden, als sollen durchgehen dem Inu von Vavod Minu Esum. And the Yidden, anyways, they had already been decreed that they should go through this affliction, this torture, this pain of being worked, enslaved, and to be afflicted, that they will afflict them. They're not going to pay because what they caused bad to the nor efreya b'chirosam, but because of their bad choice, of the rishus halev shel hamitzrim, on the evilness of the heart of the Egyptian, that they chose to zayin mitzirim liyisrael. They wanted to be those who make it difficult and oppress the Yidden. Therefore, they are the one through them what the Gzeir was accomplished. Basically, the point is the reason why the Egyptians got punished is because they made a bad choice. Yes, the Yidden were going to get punished anyways, but they did not have to be the ones. The Rebbe says the Rambam does not accept the Ravid's answer that they did more than they were decreed, because that's all included, whatever they did. But the Rambam's answer is that they didn't have to be the ones that are doing it. It's bad choices that they're getting punished for. And the Rebbe further says, what about Paro? Paro was the king. He, l'chayra, did not have a choice. he was the king. He was supposed to be the one who was enslaving them. So why would Pare be punished? Can't say somebody else could have done it. The king, he has to be the one who's enslaving them in Egypt. But the Rebbe explains, Pare didn't do it because he was doing the fulfillment of the mitzvahs of the Eibishter. He did it because he was an evil person. So he's going to pay for that evilness in the heart. The whole point that Rebbe wants to bring it, it's all for the evilness on your heart. It's not what you do, like by the scales that the Rebbe spoke about. It's not that you're cheating the other person. It's about the bad trickery that is in your heart. Let's go weiter. The Rebbe said we can add would seem to this. When we talk about Ubahagdim, by first introducing the question, der Biur Hanal von Rambam benegeh de Geseide von Vavodim Vinu Oisom, the Rambam's explanation as the decree that they're going to enslave them and they're going to afflict them, that indeed they didn't have to choose it, it could be done through somebody else. Is L'choira Tirutz Maspik, not of the Mitzrayim. That's only a sufficient answer for the Egyptians, the people, the Egyptian people. Bibaldas, jeder Mitzri Proti, since each individual Mitzri had got the Brere needs to Mitzri sein, he had the choice not to make the Jews trouble. Und die Geseide wollte sich durchgeführt durch andere. And the decree would have been accomplished to others. Aber wenn ich gehe zu Pare Melech Mitzrayim, but as far as Pare the king of Egypt, was wegen ihm read the Rambam in a friedliche Halacha. The Rambam says in a previous Halacha, as Chotom Atz Mitchila, first he sinned by himself. V'hor Ali Yisrael Hagorim Ba'artze, and he did hate Ali Yisrael Hagorim Ba'artze, he did bad to the Eden that lived in his land. When the Noch is given Onshei, and then he was punished Limnoya Tshuva Mimenu, to prevent the Tshuva from him, Achini from him until the Eibishter collected and he punished him. So over here we see he was punished is Nishayach and Turnazeh. You can't say somebody else could have done it, like by the Mitzrayim. Because this decree of Hashem that they're going to enslave them and afflict them, it needed to be accomplished, it needed to be done through the king of the country, who should decree on his people to enslave the Jews. It turns out that because there was a gezeda that they're going to make them work and afflict them, is pare al koponim, just pare, at least pare, given muchrich zu mishabet sein Eden, he was forced to enslave the Eden. So why would pare be punished? Muzman zon. So therefore we have to say, even though that this needed to do through pare von deswegen, since the reason Pari did it is nit kidei lekayim gzeres HaKadosh Baruch Hu avod nevinoism. It's not in order to fulfill Hashem's decree that they're going to enslave them and they will afflict them. But mitzad zayrish zalev, he did it because of his evilness in his heart. He's an ereshgevon lareya b'chirosei. That's why he was punished for his bad choice. V'al derech v'mizmaynish demod lareya b'chirosei. This is similar to a person who is being punished, who is punished for bad choices. The Eibishter knows everything that's going to be. Valdos was their mensch is boicher bera, but the reason that the person chooses to do bad is nit mitzad yedis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nor mitzad zay bechira. That's not because Hashem knows, but that's his choice. So we're always being punished because of our choices. So Pare was punished because of his choice. Kumtois. So it turns out the negate to Pare, and as the way it relates to Pare, was the Geseide von Vavodim Vinu Oisom is Melachatchila given Oisgestalt. That this enslavement and they're going to afflict them was to begin with. It was set up as his durchgeführt werden durch him. It should be accomplished through him. The Eibishter knows, the Eibishter wants that. So his entire punishment is because of the evilness of his heart, not what he did, because what he did was going to happen anyways. But he made bad choices. He was being punished for bad choices. So this tells us that the special affliction over here, the special punishment, is not for doing something. It's just for the bad that you have in your heart. So, Pihanal, Isaiah, the Teuchnis of Mitzvahs Midas, based on what we explained before, in the context what the Mitzvah Midas, that it's all about the heart. Yes, the Vair Favos, the Rambam Kloistois, Davke Dem Inyan Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why the Rambam chooses this idea in the exodus of Egypt, Sheitchilas Hatzivui. He says, why is it like Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because this is the beginning of the command. Because he points out, he tries to point out over here, as der Chomer meyuchat for mitzvahs midas legabe andere isugre, that special seriousness of this mitzvah of measurement, when you measure it next to other prohibitions of stealing, etc. The Tam Hadover was the Torah, Aser b'miyuchad the etzem asiyah u'shiyas from Amidah Cheseda. The reason why the Torah specifically prohibits making and keeping a measure which is lacking is about the ormo beliboy shel odom, because that deceit which is in the heart of the person is the shoirish utchaschala von alle anderen Yone Geneva. That's the root and the beginning of all other areas of theft. The Haschola from Geneva Verno is the beginning of stealing and cheating is in this. Was Eider is abgefallen before he had descended, fell to the level, Adkedekach, to such an extent, to want to steal from other one. Nor all what he wants to do is he wants to measure with a accounting. He wants to give a crown, but not on diuk. He doesn't want to be accurate. And misht arain nit ehrlichkeit. He gets mixed in not straightforwardness, not honesty. To measure with a measure. He's going to measure, but there's going to be a lacking. Und der noch, that's the beginning. You start off with that. Und der noch is yored midechi el dechi. Then he goes and descends from one step to the other step. Bis so to the fact that he starts stealing and cheating and stealing. By welches is over there, there's just one, just want to cheat. To take away the money of your friend in a non-just way. It starts off with trying to deceit a little bit to create accounting which is not accurate. That's where it all starts, making these false weights and these lacking measurements. That's where it starts. Eventually it leads to the level in which you actually end up stealing and cheating what belongs to somebody else. And therefore, vergleichen dich mit mitzvahs midas mit Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's why comparing the mitzvah of midas with the exodus of Egypt, mitzad the nekuda meshutefes behem, kenal siv daled and hey, because of their common point, as the Rebbe said in the siv daled and hey, in which the Rebbe says that the mitzvah of midos in Dalet, the mitzvahs of measurement, has to do with the honesty of the person not to have even created a measurement. And in Sichos, which the Rebbe talks about the heart of the Egyptians and Pari, that is a common mitzvah. Is the Rambam madgish them inyan in Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that's why the Rambam emphasizes Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shehi tchilas hatzivui. That's the beginning of the command. So I always bringen to express, to bring out vidoretzich wegen inyonim belchazayin tchila, that this is the beginnings. So the Rambam says tchila. The comparison is because they're both not action; they're just deceit, or it's in the person's heart what they want to do. But he uses the language. This is the beginning because that's sort of the beginning of the slippery slope where you start off. So I rosh bringen vidoretzich wegen inyonim belchazayin tchila. Mitzvahs midas was is the tchila. That's the beginning of the commands of theft and cheating. The has in itself the same characteristic from Tchilas Hatzivui, the Chol HaTorah Yetzias Mitzrayim, that has the same characteristic of the first command of Old Torah Yetzias Mitzrayim, which was the deceit or the evil in the heart, which started off and brought about all the other stuff that followed. And Chesed Rebbe says, "Ba'emek yoser, b'derech hamusar." To take this deeper, according to the moral of it, yesh la'osif, we can add as tchilas hatzivui. So here the Rebbe explained tchilas hatzivui. This is just because these are all the beginnings that lead to further actions, to further deterioration. But ba'emek yoser, b'derech hamusar, even in the way of the morals, yesh la'imar, yesh la'osif, we can add as tchilas hatzivui, that you search from kol haTorah kula, the beginning of the command, which means the basis of all Torah, is verbunden mit des Hiris in mitzvahs midis. It's all based on being careful with the mitzvahs of measure. This is euch merumes bedivra hamedrash, as hinted in the word of medrash, as al ovin zeh, for this reason, bishvil mishkolis, which would be scales which are done, weights which are wrong. But Amalek, that's why Amalek came. The melemtes of their phone, we learn it, the fact was the Torah is masmich, the Parshas Teitzei, the Torah juxtaposes, brings close in the portion Teitzei, Parshas Amalek to Parshas Mishkolis over there, puts him in the portion of Kiseitze next to Amalek. Lo yilecho goimer even ve'even, not to have difference in, Eifo ve'eifo, and then the Torah tells about Amalek. But Amalek is gekumen b'derech b'tzeichem Mitzrayim. He came on the road when you left Egypt. In the Achonetek to Kabbalas HaTorah, as we're preparing to receive the Torah. By Amalek is the Reishis Goyim. He's the beginning, the opening of the nations. Der Shoyresh v'haschole von alle inyonei hisnagdus of Torah. He's the root from all matters that oppose Torah. Is the Reishis Goyim. We're saying that because of the Avim Mishkolis, they had to face off with Amalek, who is the Reishis Goyim, who starts the head of anything that opposes Torah. L'chayra, was is also der Gewalt von Avim Mishkolis? Why is it such a big deal? The sin of Mishkolis, bizas to the damsels, I'm a Yom Amalek, so that this should be, Amalek should come because of that. Is there from Gufa Muchach, so from this itself, the fact that it did bring Amalek, as Oven Mishkolis is Negea Tzukim from Kol HaTorah Kula, that the sin of the weights is Negea to all Torah Kula, which explains why the Rambam says Haschol is the mitzvah. That's what in the test. Eden seinen doch bonim atem lavai lekech. Yidden are sons to God your God. We're children of Hashem. Chelek Havaya Amay. His people are a portion of Hashem. Wie is Meglach? So how is it possible as the Yitzhahara soll kennen einreden na Eden zu begehen achet? How could the Yitzhahara convince a Yid to commit a sin? Is that entering them? The answer on that is Oven Mishkolis. It's the sin of the weights, which means it's gradual. The Yitzhahara complete Belachatchilat zu Ayiden. He doesn't start off by coming to a Yid as there's all made it Zayin B'Kodesh Baruch Hu. He should rebel against Hashem. Today he tells him do so. Prooft machen a chesorn in sein Mida. He's trying to make a lacking in his measure. Is maskim amedav zich firen bechlolus mit amida. He agrees that generally speaking there needs to be a measure. Like the midas v'agbolus v'shulchan aruch in this context. The measures and the limitations of Torah. Teinet ober, but he argues as macht nit ois eib de midas o seiner chaseda. It doesn't matter if the measure is going to be lacking. Ubefrat if it's blazer chasher kolshu, especially if it's only lacking a small amount, almost nothing. Nochme, is a fila maskim as der idzel hoben an even mishkal shlema v'tzedek. He agrees, let him have one proper, complete stone, a righteous stone. Yeah, tober as in zukom to the meverslay. But he says, in addition to that whole stone, the proper measure, so that noch an even nitke shleim. Should have another stone which is not whole. Even goymer, efa ve'efa, g'dei luktana, a large one or a small one. Teinet by Eden seine Veran zwei midis. He says the Eden do have two measures. When you are dealing with neshama matters, the spiritual matters of the person, is dort taken geyas the middles of sein bediuk. Over there, it's important that the measure should be exactly the middles v'agbolos Shulchan Aruch according to the measure and the limitations of the Shulchan Aruch. But when you're dealing with bodily matters, the human needs, physical needs, there you can fit into measure. As that should go along with the measures of the world. To the extent, as we said earlier, today he says do so. Go ahead and worship Avodah. Starts off with the lacking, that's the haschola, then it eventually degrades to the lower. The far is Ove Mishkolus verbunden mit Vayove Amalek. That's why it's connected with Amalek coming. Valtchilas bi'osir shel klipas Amalek is the beginning when Amalek comes of the klip Amalek is as Eden is nit atnua in Eden. What does it mean when klipas Amalek comes to Yid? It's not a movement for merida geluyo neged Hashem, a open rebellion against Hashem. Norvos warf darein svekes. He starts bringing in doubts. Amalek big matri sofik is the same numerical value. Amalek doubt. Keverumas in them was vayova Amalek is given verbunden mit nechet von Eden, as hinted that Amalek came that was associated with the sin of Eden. What was the sin Eden then? You tested Hashem to say, is Hashem here? You have a suffix. That's Amalek. Und der Sofek, this doubt, the header tekef Amuna, the lack of the force of Amuna, v'chanem durch alle teilen von Menschen b'shove, Amuna penetrates and encompasses all the person equally, is Reishis Goyim. That's the beginning of Amalek. Der Shoirish v'aschole von al Nyon Roim. This is the beginning and the root of all bad things. Und der Riber, durch dem was mi zohir in midus mishkolos, through that you're careful the measure and the weights. You have just one complete measure, whole and just right, for all matters. This brings to the observance of the entire Torah. We'll show in the Rambam to use the lashon of the Rambam. Chobal makabel of mitzvahs midas. If you accept the mitzvah of midas, Yetzias Mitzrayim, then you agree to Yetzias Mitzrayim shegrom l'chol hatzivuyim. This is the cause for all the tzivuyim to everything be completed in the proper way. This is Sichos, Shabbos Parshas Vayeshev Tovshim and Vov, and Purim Tovshin Chavbes.